Hello and welcome to those of you watching Tigray TV live on satellite television, as well as on our social media platforms, Facebook and YouTube. I'm Saplor Glama and I'm here with the English news for the hour. Moving on to the first news, Tigray External Affairs Office issued a statement earlier today condemning a recent announcement by the UN suspended aid delivery via the Samara-Ab'ala-Maghala route, the only land-based humanitarian corridor into Tigray. The statement rebuked allegations by the United Nations of the ongoing fightings in Ab'ala, saying Tigrayan forces only took defensive measures against cross-border attacks by the Afar regional forces and Eritrean mercenaries. The statement read that the obstruction of humanitarian aid has been ongoing for over 6 months, with no humanitarian supplies reaching Tigray by road since mid-December, when there was no active hostility in the area, and said that the latest claim by the UN would only be valid explanation if the siege has been lifted prior to the outbreak of the conflict. The statement concluded by reiterating the government's commitment to extend the necessary cooperation to facilitate humanitarian operations. Data from Tigray Nutrition Cluster says that over 48.3% of children in Tigray are now stunted, a condition caused due to chronic malnutrition. The cluster also says that a third of children in Tigray are now suffering from malnutrition, with many being forced to discontinue treatment due to lack of medical supplies. Salome Takhlai reports.
A briefing from Tigray's Nutrition Cluster, composed of the Bureau of Health and partner organizations, says that over 48.3% of children in Tigray are now stunted. Stunting is a condition that prevents growth due to chronic malnutrition. The coordinator for the cluster, deputy head of Tigray's Bureau of Health, Dr. Isaias, also said that over a third of children in Tigray are suffering from malnutrition.
ኣብ ትግራይ 48.3% ናይ ድኽዳኸ ሓበሬታ ኣሎ
48.3% of children in Tigray are now stunted. Also, more than 3 out of 10 children are starving and 7 out of 10 pregnant and lactating women are also malnourished.
Dr. Ray also said that lack of medical supplies is further exacerbating the crisis, with over 23,000 children forced to discontinue treatment due to lack of nutritious supplies.
ካብ 23,000 ዝኾኑ ህጻናት ትሕቲ 5 ዓመት ማለት እዩ
Around 23,000 children under 5 are now at risk of death due to the blockade, according to data collected by the cluster. Additionally, around 65,000 children under 5 who are suffering from moderate malnutrition are now at risk of becoming severely malnourished due to the ongoing blockade.
The deputy head also emphasized that pregnant women and lactating mothers have been one of the most highly affected due to the ongoing siege, with 7 out of 10 suffering from malnutrition.
ኣብ ትግራይ ብምኽንያት ዕፅዋን ክባን ንሕፅረት ምግቢ ተቃሊዐን ዘለዋ.
Because of the blockade on Tigray, 75,000 pregnant and lactating mothers have been exposed to malnutrition. Treatment has now completely stopped for these mothers, and they are facing severe complications or even death.
Dr. Ray called on the international community to play its part to ensure that much needed food and medical assistance is able to reach those in urgent need.
ናይ ጀኖሳይዳል ወይ ከዓ ናይ ዘርኢ ምጽናት ተግባር ይሉ ዝገልጾ.
This indicates a clear intention for genocide. As this is a human right, the international community should put pressure on the Ethiopian government to end the siege and allow all essential items to enter Tigray.
Data from the cluster indicates that over $40 million is required to treat nearly 500,000 malnourished children and close to 200,000 mothers and pregnant women in urgent.
Head of the Bureau for Social Affairs, Mulugeta Dabalkao, gave a press conference on Friday, which he highlighted the exasperating humanitarian situation in Tigray. The Bureau head said the urban population is now one of the most affected as the humanitarian situation reached its peak. Fano Lemiru has more.
The head of the Bureau of Social Affairs, Mulugeta Dabalkao, has said that the humanitarian situation in urban areas in Tigray is rapidly deteriorating, saying the humanitarian situation in Tigray is reaching its climax.
በትግራይ ደረጃ ጥሜት More and more people in Tigray are starving, especially in the urban area. The humanitarian crisis is deteriorating further. Starvation-related diseases are showing an increase. People are also committing suicide because they are so desperate. This is an indicator that the humanitarian situation in Tigray is reaching its climax.
While expressing gratitude for the delivery of much-needed medical supplies into the region, Mulgeta said that the quantity of medical supplies reaching in the region is wholly insufficient, considering the magnitude of the medical emergency in Tigray.
ICRC has been able to deliver over 15.8 tons of medical supplies on 14 humanitarian flights. But this is nothing compared to the demand on the ground, while lack of fuel has made it impossible to deliver the supplies to health facilities across the state.
Mulgeta Debalko also called attention to the humanitarian crisis in western Tigray, saying the situation remains dire.
Fano and Eritrean forces are massacring hundreds, if not thousands, of Tigrayans in western Tigray, while ethnic Kunamas are on the brink of extinction as the killing and torture of its members continues. I call on human rights organizations and the international community to be voices for the voiceless.
In a statement last week, the Bureau head had announced that over 90% of the population in Tigray is in urgent need of humanitarian assistance.
There are over 2.2 million internally displaced persons in Tigray who are now unable to fulfill basic needs as the Ethiopian government maintains a blockade on all essential goods, including food aid and medical supplies. We spoke with IDPs from Western Tigray that say lack of medications and other supplies is taking them to the brink. Amanuel Amar has more.
The invasion of the Amhara forces in the western part of Tigray has been the most difficult scenario for the people of Tigray, which has forced them to abandon their land and everything they have ever owned. On the top of this, the Ethiopian government has blocked humanitarian aid, making their situation even harder from time to time. Makhalesh Tsagai, an IDP displaced from western Tigray, says that the blockade by the Ethiopian government has left them to perish.
The government has blocked the roads. It has deprived the people from getting medication and social security services, leaving them to perish. So the international law shall look into our situation.
People have been displaced from western Tigray because of the invasion of the Amhara forces and Eritrean troops, as they did with other parts of Tigray. We have visited an IDP center in Mekelle city that is mostly sheltered by elders and children from western Tigray. From inside a room reserved for patients with chronic illnesses awaiting medical treatment, Kidana Geuregergis speaks of the medical and food shortages at the center.
I am a patient suffering from psychosis and diabetes. On the top of the food shortage, there is no medical supply. The food shortage in the IDP center is unendurable for diabetic people under medication like myself. Because of the medical supply deprivation, patients are in a critical condition and they are forced to use expired drugs and local herbal medications of scientifically improved dosage. I used to take this drug 5 years ago. Now it sticks on my tongue and gives me fatigue. I used to take herbal medicines like moringa and aloe vera. Aloe vera lowers the sugar level extremely, so the body demands food types with content like wheat to balance the sugar level. Since I can't get enough food, I had to give up using it altogether. I also used to buy medicine for psychosis from pharmacies, but now I can't afford it. I used to take insulin for my diabetes, but there hasn't been insulin for the last 3 months. I am in a dire situation awaiting my death. That's it.
Brahanu Tadele, coordinator of the IDP center, says that one man has died of lack of medication and 12 others are in a critical condition.
There are 85 people with chronic disease and 36 of them are with disability. There are 12 patients in severe condition of lack of medication. We lost one of our brothers to cancer. He passed away due to lack of medicine. We, the people of Tigray, are in the worst of situations.
The situation with the most IDP centers in Tigray is getting worse day after day. Unless they are provided with an emergent medical and food supplies, the IDPs may not survive any longer than they already have.
Over 1.2 million internally displaced persons were displaced from western Tigray, where Ethiopian forces led by militia from the Amhara region committed an ethnic cleansing campaign to rid the area of its majority Tigrayan population. We spoke with IDPs from Shararo that shared the tragic of events that forces them to leave their hometown of Maishat in western Tigray. Miro Neman.
IDPs from western Tigray sheltered in Shiraro say that Amhara expansionists have committed countless atrocities in western Tigray. Before they made it to the IDP camps, they are now sheltered in. However, even the ones who made it to the IDP camps safely are now faced with severe danger of starvation and series of drone attacks inside the camps.
In the town of Mashet at the church of Abba Garmfis Qudus, 85 people were killed, out of which 12 of them were priestesses. They were badly tortured before they were killed.
Not only did they kill 83 people in the town of Mashet, but also returned that same week and killed 2 more people. They tortured and broke the arms of 3 women and a man's arm as well. They committed countless atrocities on our people.
The residents also mentioned that residents faced a hard time while escaping through impenetrable mountainous trails. Nevertheless, they had to choose the trail because the troops will kill them if they find them trying to escape with no questions asked.
Even when we were trying to escape, we were being attacked by the Eritrean troops. There were a batch of 25 people who were trying to escape with us. It still remains unknown.
Tremendous amount of people died while we were crossing Takaza River. Our people didn't only die in the town, but 18 of them died on the people who came to our rescue, and the people who were fleeing with us were also killed on the way.
Having escaped through troublesome trails and reaching the IDP centers, they say that they are still suffering from severe starvation and series of drone attacks every single day.
The bodies of so many people, women included, is swelling up due to starvation. On the top of this, we are faced with water shortage.
We are unable to get any help due to the siege. We don't have blankets and we don't have food. We are only living with hope in our hearts and no food to eat.
No aid has arrived for the whole 8 months. We are only relying on the people of Shararo for help. The hardships that the IDPs are facing are countless. First, we are forced to leave from our own houses, got displaced and then killed or mugged on the streets while trying to escape. Then, even after making it here to the IDP center, we are suffering from the starvation and drone attacks that occurred almost on a daily basis.
Unless the international community act meaningfully to lift the siege imposed on the people of Tigray, the situation with the IDPs will get worse and they may even eventually die of hunger.
Massacres, arbitrary detention, and sexual violence had become the norm in Tigray during the hostile occupation by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces. Our reporters visited Qolla Tembin in central Tigray, where Ethiopian forces and their Eritrean allies killed over 250 civilians and injured many more. Abraha Garwatinsai has more on that.
This is Qolla Tembin in the central Tigray, where local officials say over 256 civilians were killed, while 140 others were injured during 8 months long occupation of the area by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces. Abrahat Haftu is a mother of 7 and lives in Qolla Tembin. She says she lost 2 of her children and her husband on February 10 last year. Abrahat says soldiers wouldn't even allow her to bury their bodies.
We found one of my child's body lying on the street. We couldn't pick it up because there were gunmen aiming at us from every direction. Eventually, we managed to get 2 of the bodies, but the rest of them remained on the street for 3 days. Later on, we buried 7 bodies in a single grave. I lost my husband, Gabra Abazgi Gabra Hawria, and 2 of my children, Hagos Gabra Abazgi and Kalai Gabra Abazgi. Kalai was a teacher.
Sahinesh Hailu is another victim whose 3 children have been brutally murdered by the Ethiopian forces.
They killed 3 of my children, Tsagai Gabra Gergis, Ogbay Gabra Gergis, and Tasfai Gabra Gergis. They wouldn't even let us bury the bodies. Their bodies remained on the street for 3 days. They killed my husband, Desalin Gabra Xavier, and Nugusa, my husband's nephew. They also killed Alam Tsahai, my sister-in-law, and his cousin Yosef Gabramedhin, who had fled Yatila and nearby vicinity to save his life because the Ethiopian forces were massacring civilians there.
On the 3rd day, at 3 a.m., we were able to get the bodies and bury them. We only escaped because we hid in the bathroom.
Hagos Hadra, advisor to the chief administrator of Qolla Tembin, says Ethiopian and Eritrean forces have executed 256 innocent civilians and have injured 140 others in their 8 months long occupation.
ህይወት ሰብ ሓሊፉ እዩ
More than 256 civilians were executed and many others injured by joint perpetrators of the massacre in our Warada.
Occupation of Tigray by invading Ethiopian and Eritrean forces saw the killing of innocent civilians and the wanton destruction of public as well as private property.
Our reporters visited Cheli in southeastern Tigray, where we met with Azmara Gabrasilasi. Azmara had lost her granddaughter, shot and killed by Ethiopian forces in February of 2021. But local officials say her story is far from an exception, with over half a dozen women killed in the area and many more raped or gang raped by the allied Ethiopian and Eritrean forces. Kabromul Debrahan reports.
Extrajudicial killings, rape, and the wanton destruction of public facilities have been one of the telling features of the conflict in Tigray. Fatah Mamu was born and raised in Cheli, southeastern Tigray, by her grandmother Azmara Gabrasilasi. Her grandmother says Fatah was pregnant when Ethiopian forces shot and killed her last year.
They killed my granddaughter. She was just about to give birth to her firstborn child. I raised her and I found her body lying dead here.
The soldiers came here on Sunday morning. They killed her and left her body here. I screamed when I saw her body. 2 men helped me take her body home. Stayed home the whole night, afraid that the soldiers would kill us. We buried her the next day along with 3 other people.
Local official Zamikel Tkhlamedin says Fatah Mamu was one of over half a dozen women killed by Ethiopian forces and their allies from Eritrea.
8 women were shot dead and 58 were either raped or gang raped, some by as many as 5 soldiers at a time. Some of these women are experiencing psychological trauma, while some are HIV positive. They have shot and killed a pregnant woman and stabbed another woman to death with a knife. Another woman died after she was raped by 5 soldiers. Many women are yet to come forward with their stories because they are afraid of how they may be treated if they do. We should all play our part to ensure they are able to share what happened to them and justice can be served.
The 7-month-long occupation of Cheli by allied Ethiopian and Eritrean forces has left an unforgettable mark on its residents. But many more still living in occupied areas in western Tigray find that the living nightmare is far from over.
On the 35th of ordinary session of the African Union, Ethiopia's Abiy Ahmed called for the establishment of a continent-wide media house to fight disinformation about the continent and promote African agendas. But our reporter Winta Kidana finds Abiy Ahmed and Ethiopian state media being actually at the forefront of spreading misinformation and shallow narratives on the African continent and its people.
In his address to African leaders on the 35th ordinary session of the African Union last weekend, Abiy Ahmed called for the establishment of a continent-wide media house to fight disinformation about the continent and promote African agendas, saying that Africa is often portrayed negatively in the international media as a continent troubled by civil war, hunger, corruption, greed, and poverty.
Africa's media representation on the international stage. Africa is often portrayed in international media negatively. The endless representation of the continent troubled by civil wars, hunger, corruption, greed, disease, and poverty is demeaning and dehumanizing and likely driven by a calculated strategy and agenda. This stereotypical and negative media representation of Africa not only disinforms the rest of the world about our continent, but also shapes the way we see ourselves as Africans. Telling our own stories and shaping our own narratives must be our top priority. In this regard, I would like to propose to this august body the establishment of an African Union Continental Media House. This media house could be organized to provide authoritative news and information on our continent, fight disinformation, promote our collective agenda, and offer opportunities for Pan-African voice to be heard.
But Abiy Ahmed himself has been part of spreading misinformation and shallow interpretations of black history. Abiy Ahmed has gone so far as reducing a long history of oppression and systematic disenfranchisement to a failure of positive thinking.
የአሜሪካ የአገዛዝ ስርዓት ውስጥ በጣም የተጎዳ የሚባል ማህበረሰብ ጥቁርና ጁ ነው። ሁለቱም ተገርፈዋል፣ ተጨቁነዋል፣ ታስረዋል፣ እንዳይሰሩ ሀብት እንዳያደረጁ ሆነዋል። ልዩነቱ ጁ ከሲቪል ራይት በኋላ ትንሽ መብት መታየት ሲጀምር ዘፈኑ፣ ግጥሙ፣ ፊልሙ፣ ድራማ ወደፊት ሆነ። እንዴት ዓለምን ኮንከር ማድረግ እንደሚችል ኢኮኖሚክ ፓወር መፍጠር እንደሚችል ያስባል። ጥቁር ደግሞ እዚህ ላይ ቆሞ ትናንትና ኮገረፉ፣ ገደሉ፣ እንዲያደረጉ ይላል። አሁን ያለው ትውልድ ትናንትና ውስጥ እንዲኖር አደረገው። እነዚህ ደግሞ አሁን ነገ ውስጥ እንዲያስብ አደረጉት። 50 ዓመት አልሞላም ጁ ሀብታም ሆነ፣ ጁ ፓወርፉል ሆነ፣ ጥቁር ነፃ ደሃ ሆነ። ነፃነቱን አግኝቷል፣ መዝፈን ይችላል፣ ግን ደህንነቱን መቀየር አልቻለም።
But a proposal from the Prime Minister to establish a continent-wide media house also begs a question of how media outlets and media workers are being treated in Ethiopia. As the Ethiopian government has kept Tigray under a complete communications blackout, it has arrested, tortured or killed any journalist that has dared to cover the story. Ethiopia is the second highest jailer of journalists in sub-Saharan Africa, with 14 journalists behind bars. Almost all Ethiopian journalists working to bring to light the gross violation of human rights in Tigray, while 2 journalists, including Tigray television's David Kabeda, were shot and killed in 2021. Meanwhile, no foreign journalist has set foot in Tigray for the past 7 months, leaving its people voiceless amidst a humanitarian catastrophe. The ethics of state media has also significantly deteriorated since Abiy came to the helm of power in Tigray, with state media calling for the mass arrest, torture, and at times elimination of the people of Tigray. On the following video, a journalist from Amhara Media Corporation, a state-owned media, tossed the idea of changing the word Tigray into a nomenclature of crime, comparing the situation in Tigray with Nigeria's Biafra.
ለሺ ዓመታት አስበ ይሄን ትውልድ ማሸነፍ ካልቻልክ permanently neutralize ማድረግ ካልተቻለ ለሀገር ለህዝቦቻችን ድጋሚ አደጋ በማይሆንበት ልክ እንዲቃጅ ካልተደረገ በጣም አደገኛ ስለሆነ አስተሳሰቡን ለማሸነፍ ደግሞ በጣም ብዙ ስራዎች መስራት ይኖርባቸዋል። በጣም ከፍተኛ ስራዎች ኢቭን ትግራይ የሚባለው ለምሳሌ የናይጄሪያ መንግስት በቢያፍራና ትግራይን በለፈው ስንሰራ ያላነሳነው ነገር ነበር። ለምሳሌ መጨረሻ ላይ ቢያፍራ የሚባል ነገር ወንጀል ነው የተደረገው ናይጄሪያ ላይ። most probably ኢትዮጵያ መንግስት ትግራይ የሚለውን ቃል እንኳን ክሪሚናላይዝ ሊያደርገው ይችላል ብዬ ነው የምፈራው። ምክንያቱም የደረሰው ጥፋት እንደው ዝም ብለን ይሄንን ስም ያሽሞነሞነን ይዘን የምንቀጥልበትን ሁኔታ የሚፈቅድም ስላልሆነ ማለት ምናልባት ወደ 4-5 ክልልነትና በዞን አስተዳደርነት የሚዋቀርበትን ሁኔታ ፈልጎ ይሄንን የክራይም ኢንተርፕራይዝ የሆነ ክልል permanently ከነስያሜው ከኖሜንክላቸራው ሳይቀር revisit ማድረግ ስለሚያስፈልግ
The role of media organization in both exasperating the conflict and normalizing human suffering has been significant, but the call for a continent-wide media organization is still needed to help African people across the continent learn more about each other and speak truth to power.
And that's it for today's English news, and thank you for tuning in. See you back here next Tuesday. Until then, take care.